Nothing about that Thursday felt like a Thursday that would change everything. That's the thing I keep coming back to. Nothing felt wrong at all. Until it did. My name is Todd Moore, 73 years old, 31 years as a structural engineer in this city, Boston-born, Boston-built, and perfectly content to stay that way. I live in a brownstone on Rutland Square in South End. I drive a 2021 Volvo XC90. I had no enemies, no feuds, no unfinished business with the world. I am, by any honest measure, a simple man with a good life. And on the 22nd of November, my son invited me to Thanksgiving dinner. That's it. That's all it was. A Thursday, dinner with family, or so I thought. Welcome to Dad's Raw Revenge. Hit that like button. Drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from. This story is going to take you somewhere. Alan called me the Tuesday before. I was at Render, halfway through my coffee, watching the morning foot traffic on Warren Avenue, when my phone buzzed on the table. Alan, I picked up. Dad, you coming Thursday? Lauren's been in the kitchen since Monday. I'm talking the full spread. Define full spread, I said. Clam chowder to start, roast turkey, herb butter, the works. She's doing her cranberry relish. You know, the one with the orange zest you liked last year. I did like that cranberry relish. That detail right there is probably what got me. Who else is coming? I asked. Just us. Keith's staying here now, so he'll be around. And Lauren's cousin Jeff is driving up from Needham with his girlfriend Amy. Nothing big. Casual. I almost said no. Not for any particular reason. Just the comfortable inertia of a man who has learned to enjoy his own quiet. But the cranberry relish and the fact that I hadn't seen Alan in nearly 6 weeks. What time? I said. 3:30. Come hungry. I smiled. I'll bring wine. I hung up, finished my coffee, and spent exactly 0 seconds thinking anything was wrong. That's the thing I want you to understand going in. I was happy to go. I was looking forward to it. Thanksgiving morning, I woke up at 7 o'clock, made coffee, read the Globe on my tablet, watched about 20 minutes of the parade on television before it became too loud for a quiet man's morning. I showered, dressed, gray slacks, a white button-down, my charcoal overcoat, stopped at the wine shop on Tremont Street, and picked up a bottle of Malbec and drove the Volvo up to Chestnut Hill Avenue feeling, if I'm being completely honest, content. Alan and Lauren's house is a colonial revival. Brick-faced, black shutters, a front walk lined with ornamental boxwoods that Lauren tends like they're her children. The kind of house that announces its owner is doing well without technically bragging about it. I pulled in behind Keith's Jeep Grand Cherokee at 3:27 and sat for a moment, engine idling, looking at the house with the warm light coming through the front windows and the smell of roasting turkey already reaching me even through the closed car door. Nice, I thought. This is going to be a nice evening. Lauren answered the door before I knocked. She was in an apron, hair back, and she pulled me into a hug that I'll admit surprised me. Lauren is not what you'd call a physically demonstrative woman, but it was Thanksgiving, and people expand a little on holidays. I didn't think anything of it. Todd, right on time. Give me that coat. Alan appeared from the living room, hand already extended for the wine bottle. Dad, you look good. Come in. Keith was on the couch, scotch in hand, watching the pregame. He raised his glass. Brother. Keith. I settled into the armchair across from him. How long you staying with them now? He shrugged. Couple more weeks. Maybe through Christmas. He swirled his glass. Divorce is a hell of a thing, Todd. It is, I agreed. We watched the pregame in comfortable silence for a while. That particular brand of male family silence that doesn't need filling. The house smelled extraordinary. Butter and herbs, and something sweet from the oven. Lauren had set the dining table properly. Cloth napkins, the good china, candles not yet lit. Jeff and Amy arrived from Needham around 4 o'clock. Quiet, pleasant people. The kind that contribute just enough conversation to keep a dinner moving without dominating it. Everything was completely, perfectly normal. I cannot stress that enough. About 20 minutes before Lauren called us to the table, Alan came in from the kitchen holding a small dark bottle. Brown label, minimalist font. The kind of packaging that signals it costs more than it should. Hey Dad, before I forget. He held it out. I've been seeing this nutritionist Lauren got us on, and she put me on to this. Heavy metal detox drops, all natural. She says most people our age are carrying around accumulated environmental toxins and don't even know it. Does wonders for energy levels, apparently. I looked at the bottle. I looked at my son. Alan, I'm not taking supplements from a nutritionist I've never met. Dad, I take what Dr. Harris tells me to take. That's it. It's not a medication. It's a supplement. Like a vitamin. He sat down on the arm of the couch. Look, I've been taking it for 3 weeks. Lauren, too. You mentioned being tired at the end of October, remember? On the phone. I had mentioned that. A passing comment about feeling run down after a long week. He remembered. It's completely natural, Alan continued. No interactions. I checked. I examined the bottle. The label listed botanical extracts, trace minerals, distilled water. Nothing alarming. Nothing that looked remotely pharmaceutical. My son had remembered an offhand comment I made about being tired and gone out, and bought me something for it. I felt, in that moment, genuinely touched. A few drops, I said. In a drink. That's it. Lauren appeared at the doorway right then. Apron off, hair down, carrying a glass of sparkling water. I already poured you one, Todd. It's really tasteless, I promise. You won't even know it's there. Alan measured the drops himself, carefully, 11 of them. I watched him count. The way you absently observe small domestic details without attaching meaning to them. Cheers, Dad. Cheers, I said, and I drank it. Dinner was everything Alan had promised. Lauren's clam chowder was the real Boston kind, thick, cream-based, chunks of potato and fresh clam, served with oyster crackers on the side. The turkey was properly rested, herb butter worked under the skin, the kind of result that takes real effort. Cape Cod cranberry relish with orange zest. Parker House rolls still warm from the oven. Green beans with slivered almonds. Jeff opened a bottle of Pinot Noir he'd brought from Needham. Amy complimented the table setting. Keith had a third scotch. It was genuinely a wonderful Thanksgiving dinner. The conversation moved the way good family dinners do. Sports, then real estate prices because you can't avoid it in Boston. Then Keith telling a story about a fender bender on the Mass Pike that was considerably more entertaining in the telling than it had any right to be. Alan was relaxed. Lauren was warm. The candles were lit. I was happy. Midway through the main course, somewhere between the second roll and reaching for the cranberry dish, it arrived without announcement. My mouth went dry, completely suddenly dry, like someone had turned off a valve. I reached for my water glass and noticed, in a distant and confused way, that my hand felt slightly disconnected from the instruction I'd given it. A faint metallic taste moved across the back of my tongue. I set my fork down quietly, took a breath. The room hadn't moved, but something in my equilibrium had shifted by a fraction. I felt warm, then not warm. Am I getting sick? I genuinely, 100% thought I was coming down with something. A bug. Maybe the start of a winter cold. I'm 73. The body occasionally sends memos without explaining itself. You all right, Dad? Alan's voice from across the table. Fine, I said. Just a little warm. I smiled. Lauren, this turkey is genuinely exceptional. She beamed. Thank you, Todd. I kept eating, kept talking. But the metallic taste persisted, and the subtle wrongness in my equilibrium didn't pass the way a head rush does. It just quietly deepened. Maybe some water will sort it. Excuse me a moment, I said, setting my napkin on the table. Going to grab some water from the kitchen. I can get it. Lauren half rose. Stay? Stay? Enjoy your dinner. I waved her back down. I know where the kitchen is. The kitchen was quiet and cool after the warmth of the dining room. I filled a glass and stood at the counter drinking it slowly, waiting for whatever this was to pass. The metallic taste didn't pass. I set the glass down, and my hand, still not entirely cooperating, caught the edge of my napkin and sent it sliding off the counter. It drifted down and landed near the trash can, tucking into the narrow gap between the cabinet and the bin. I bent down to retrieve it, and I saw the blister pack. It was wedged in the shadow of that gap, torn, partially crumpled, pushed back far enough that you'd never see it standing upright. A corner of foil packaging with the clinical block lettering that belongs to prescription medication, not a kitchen. Someone in this house is sick and hasn't told me. That was my first thought, my only thought. Genuine, immediate concern. The instinct of a father and an older brother wondering which member of his family was dealing with something they'd been too proud or too private to mention. I picked it up and turned it over. Scopolamine. I didn't know what it was. I want to be absolutely clear about that. I was not alarmed by the name. I was concerned the way any parent is concerned when they discover a family member is on medication they knew nothing about. Alan's blood pressure had been high the previous year, Keith had mentioned something about vertigo over the summer. I took out my phone to look it up, to understand what this person was dealing with, to know whether I should say something or leave it alone. I typed the name into the search bar. The results loaded. I read the first entry. Then I read it again. Scopolamine, contraindicated in elderly patients. Known effects include acute disorientation, profound short-term memory loss, temporary amnesia, and episodes of confusion that may present as early-stage dementia. The glass of water was still in my hand. From the dining room came the sound of Keith's laugh at something, loud and easy and completely normal, and the quiet underneath it of a family finishing Thanksgiving dinner. Elderly memory loss, confusion that may present as dementia. I stood completely still in my son's kitchen and let the information arrange itself in front of me the way structural data arranges itself when you're looking at the load-bearing math of a building and something in the numbers doesn't add up. The drops, 11 drops, carefully counted. Lauren already holding the glass. You mentioned being tired at the end of October, remember? No, it's not possible. The room tilted slightly, and I understood with a cold and horrible clarity that the tilt was not from a winter cold. It was not from wine. It was not from the warmth of a holiday table. It had been in my glass before I even sat down to eat. I stood at that kitchen sink with the water running and the blister pack in my trembling hand, and I felt my mind, my sharp structured 31-year engineering mind, begin to reach for the edges of a possibility so awful that every decent instinct I had was still trying to reject it. I folded the blister pack carefully and slipped it into the breast pocket of my jacket. I turned off the tap. I picked up my water glass. I walked back to that dining room, sat down in my chair, smiled at my family, and reached for the cranberry relish, and I said nothing because I didn't know yet. Not for certain, but something had changed in that kitchen that I couldn't change back. Before I left that night, Alan pressed 2 brand new sealed bottles of the detox drops into my hands at the door. Take them every day, Dad. You'll feel so much better. I looked at my son's face, open, warm, smiling, and I searched it the way you search a blueprint for the flaw you pray isn't there. I will, I said. Thank you, Alan. I walked to the Volvo. I sat in the dark for a moment before starting the engine. Maybe it's nothing, I told myself. Maybe there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. I drove home to Southend and sat at my kitchen table and stared at that blister pack for a very long time. Then, I picked up my phone. Not because I was certain, because I needed to be sure. Stay with me, because what I found out, I wasn't ready for. There is a moment in every man's life when the ground beneath him shifts and nothing, not one single thing, will ever look the same again. Mine came at 11:47 on a Friday night in November, sitting alone at my kitchen table in Southend, Boston. I hadn't touched the bottles. They were sitting right where I'd set them when I walked in, center of the kitchen table under the overhead light, like 2 small exhibits in a case that hadn't been named yet. I'd been staring at them on and off for the better part of 2 hours, the blister pack unfolded flat beside them, my coffee gone completely cold. Scopolamine. I'd read everything Google had on it by that point. Medical databases, pharmacology references, an NIH paper on anticholinergic toxicity in geriatric patients that I read twice, even though half the terminology required a second tab to decode. I am an engineer. When something doesn't add up, I do not stop at the first explanation. I follow the load path all the way to the foundation. What I found did not have a good foundation. Scopolamine was not a supplement. It was not a wellness product. It was a prescription-controlled substance with a narrow therapeutic window used in very specific, very monitored medical contexts. Patches for motion sickness, pre-surgical sedation. What it was not was an ingredient in an all-natural detox supplement handed to a man over Thanksgiving dinner. But maybe there's an explanation, the reasonable part of me kept saying. Maybe it's a contaminated batch. Maybe it's a mislabeled product. Maybe whoever dropped that blister pack has a legitimate prescription, and this is all a terrible coincidence. I wanted that to be true. I want you to understand that. I am a father. I wanted there to be an innocent explanation more than I have ever wanted anything. But the engineer in me kept returning to one detail I couldn't explain away. 11 drops, carefully counted. Lauren already holding the glass. I picked up my phone. Erin Moore lives in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She is 29 years old and a practicing attorney, sharp as a surgical instrument and twice as precise. She left Boston 5 years ago after a bitter, irreparable falling out with Alan over their grandmother's jewelry. A dispute I now believe Alan manufactured from start to finish to remove the one person in this family who would never be fooled by him. At the time, I hadn't seen it that way. At the time, I'd stood in Alan's driveway watching Aaron's taillights disappear down Chestnut Hill Avenue and told myself it was just siblings being siblings. I had been wrong about that. I had been wrong about a lot of things. Aaron and I had maintained our relationship quietly. Phone calls, visits when Alan wasn't involved. A careful navigation around the fracture in the family. She never asked me to choose. I never made her feel like she'd lost. But calling her at midnight about her brother felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. I crossed it anyway. She picked up on the second ring. Dad, instantly alert. Aaron does not do groggy. It's almost midnight. What's wrong? I need you to listen to me, I said, all the way through. Don't interrupt until I'm done. A beat. Okay. I told her everything. The call from Alan on Tuesday, the dinner, the drops, Alan measuring 11 of them carefully into a glass Lauren had already poured, the way it hit me mid-meal, the dry mouth, the metallic taste, the room tilting in a way that had nothing to do with wine, the napkin falling, the gap between the cabinet and the bin, the blister pack, the Google search at the kitchen sink with the tap running. I told her about the 2 sealed bottles Alan pressed into my hands at the door with a smile. Take them every day, Dad. I talked for 11 minutes straight. Aaron told me later she timed it. When I finished, the line went completely quiet. Long enough that I checked the screen to see if the call had dropped. Aaron, I'm here. Her voice had changed. The midnight alertness had shifted into something else entirely, a stillness I recognized. I'd heard it once before when she was 16 and discovered her high school principal falsifying attendance records for failing athletes. She dismantled the man so methodically he resigned before the school board had finished reading her documentation. That stillness. That gear change. Don't touch the bottles, she said. I'm not touching them. Sealed? Both of them. Factory sealed. The blister pack, you have it? Right here in front of me. Good. I heard her moving. Philadelphia, 210 miles south, and I could picture her exactly. Up, barefoot, laptop already open on her kitchen counter. I need you to overnight everything to me first thing tomorrow morning. The blister pack and both sealed bottles. FedEx, not USPS. There's a location on Boylston Street. Aaron, it's the Friday after Thanksgiving. FedEx hubs run through holiday weekends. They open at 8 o'clock. A pause. Pay cash. And Dad, don't put your name on the return address. Don't put your name on the return address. That sentence landed differently than the others because that wasn't a daughter being careful. That was an attorney treating this as evidence. What are you thinking? I asked. Though part of me already knew, I didn't want the full answer yet. I'm thinking I need to know what's actually in those bottles before either of us says another word. Her voice was controlled, precise. Can you do what I'm asking? Yes. Get some sleep. I'll call you at 7 o'clock. She called at 6:52. I drove to the FedEx on Boylston Street at 8:15 the next morning. Cold, flat November light. The public garden across the way was stripped bare. The swan boats long since put away for winter. The paths empty except for a man walking a retriever and a woman in a red coat moving fast with her head down. Boston in late November is a specific kind of lonely beautiful. All gray sky and bare branches and the kind of cold that doesn't negotiate. I had the blister pack sealed in a Ziploc bag. Both bottles wrapped separately in paper towels. Padded envelope. Taped securely. For the return address, I used my neighbor Frank DeLuca, a retired postal worker on Rutland Square who owed me a favor from a contractor dispute I'd helped him navigate 3 years back. Frank didn't ask questions. Good man. I paid cash. I watched the envelope go behind the counter. Walking back to the Volvo, I stopped on the sidewalk for a moment, hands in my coat pockets, and looked up at that pewter sky. What am I doing? What is this? This is my son. I stood there on Boylston Street, 73 years old, and I gave myself exactly 60 seconds to hope I was a paranoid old man who'd read too many medical websites on a sleepless night. Then I got in the car and drove home. 4 days later, Tuesday morning, I was sitting in my living room on Rutland Square pretending to read a book. I say pretending because I had read the same paragraph on page 61 approximately 14 times without retaining a single word. My phone was on the cushion beside me. It rang at 10:12. The lab results came back. Aaron's voice, no greeting, No preamble. I set the book down. Already. I rushed it. I know people at an independent toxicology lab. They owed me a turnaround. A breath. Dad, I need you to stay calm. I was already not calm. Tell me. Both bottles. The sealed, factory-packaged, all-natural detox drops. They're laced with scopolamine. Concentrated. Significantly above any therapeutic threshold. She paused. The toxicologist flagged it immediately. His written report uses the phrase, and I'm reading this directly, consistent with intentional poisoning. The living room went very quiet. Outside on Rutland Square, a city bus ground up the street. Completely ordinary sound. Completely ordinary Tuesday morning. Intentional poisoning. How concentrated? I asked. Because I am an engineer, and I needed the specific number even when the specific number was going to destroy me. Concentrated enough that taken daily, the way Alan instructed you, the cumulative effect on someone your age would produce rapid and severe cognitive symptoms. Repeated disorientation episodes. Significant memory gaps. Confusion severe enough that anyone observing you over 2 to 3 weeks would have a very compelling medical record of serious cognitive decline. Short sentences. My brain had stopped processing long ones. They needed me to look like I was losing my mind, I said. They needed documentation, Aaron said. Medical. Behavioral. Witnessed. I also ran a trace on your property titles at the Suffolk County Registry of Deeds. Someone pulled a certified asset valuation and title search on your South End brownstone and your entire portfolio back in mid-October. The request didn't come from a bank, Dad. It came from a law firm in Brookline. A man named Richard Crane. A pause that felt like standing at the edge of something with no railing. I called a colleague who specializes in probate law in Norfolk County. Crane has a reputation in the dark corners of the Boston bar. He handles predatory guardianships. He quietly maps out high-net-worth seniors, coaches estranged family members on how to document behavior, and has them draft a preemptive guardianship and financial conservator petition. It sits in his office, completely drafted, just waiting for the client to trigger a medical emergency or a failed evaluation. The second you falter, they file it, and a probate judge strips you of your legal right to manage your own affairs. Your estate, your accounts, your property. Everything under Alan's control. My estate, real estate holdings, retirement portfolio, 31 years of disciplined investment that I had built the same way I built everything, carefully, structurally, with the long view in mind. Conservative estimate, north of $4 million. My son looked at his 73-year-old father and saw $4 million. I sat in my living room on Rutland Square, and I felt something happen inside my chest that I don't have a precise word for. It wasn't rage. Rage is hot and fast and loud. This was cold. This was structural. This was the feeling of a load-bearing wall giving way in slow motion, and knowing exactly what's going to fall. Keith signed it, I said. It wasn't a question. Keith is listed as a supporting signatory. A pause. Dad, Keith moved into that house in September. I sat with that for a moment. My brother, 53 years old, recently divorced, recently broke, showing up on Alan's doorstep 2 months before Thanksgiving with his Jeep Grand Cherokee and his scotch and his comfortable couch-based existence. Suddenly, that timeline had a completely different shape. They bought him, I said quietly. That's my read, Aaron said. His signature on that petition isn't a confused brother making a bad call. That's financial survival. I closed my eyes. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. Keith's sudden divorce in September. His sudden hospitality stay at Alan's house. The endless scotch. My brother hadn't fallen on hard times. He had sold his loyalty to my son in exchange for a cut of my life's work. Alan provided the professional setup and Keith provided the insider family validation. It was a corporate takeover of a father's mind. Her voice stayed level, but I could hear the pressure underneath it. That low-contained fury that Aaron had inherited directly from me. Are you okay? Was I okay? Was I okay sitting in the house I'd owned for 26 years with the maple trees bare outside my window and the coffee going cold on the table, having just been told that my son, my daughter-in-law, and my brother had built a coordinated legal and medical scheme to chemically impair me, document my decline, and seize everything I'd spent a lifetime building? I will be, I said. What do? We do this exactly right. Her voice shifted into something clean and decisive. No confrontations. No calls to Alan. No changes to your behavior. Nothing that signals anything has changed on your end. You hear me? Total surface normalcy. Understood. First move. I'm scheduling you for a full independent cognitive evaluation. Court admissible. There's a neurological assessment center in Framingham run by a Dr. William Hart. He's provided expert testimony in 3 elder abuse cases in Massachusetts. I've already contacted his office. She'd already called. Before she even delivered the lab results, she had already made the call. We get you evaluated clean and on record before they file anything. That document becomes the foundation of everything. When? I asked. Thursday. I'm driving up Wednesday night. The line went quiet for a moment. I looked at the book still open on my lap. Page 61. That same paragraph. Aaron. I stopped. Tried to locate the right words somewhere in the wreckage of the last 4 days. I owe you an apology for the years I let Alan, Dad. Firm, gentle. The voice of someone who has already processed the grief of a thing and come out the other side. Not now? We'll have that conversation. I promise you we will. But not now. A beat. Right now I need you focused and steady. Can you do that? Yes, I said. Good. I'll see you Wednesday. She arrived at Rutland Square at 7:43 Wednesday evening, December 4th. I watched from the front window as the silver Audi A4 with Pennsylvania plates pulled onto the street and parallel parked in one clean, unhesitating move. She stepped out in a dark wool coat, leather document bag over one shoulder, hair pulled back. 29 years old and moving like someone who had never once in her life been uncertain about where she was going. That walk. That's not from her mother. That's mine. I opened the door before she reached the steps. We stood in the doorway for a moment. The December cold pressing in from the street, the brownstone warm behind me. And then she stepped forward and hugged me. Hard. The kind of hug that carries the weight of 5 lost years and doesn't try to explain them. You look good, Dad, she said. I look 73, I said. She laughed. First real laugh I'd heard in 2 weeks. It hit me somewhere behind the sternum. Come inside. Show me everything. We worked at the kitchen table until past midnight. Aaron laid it out in order. The toxicology report, the legal filings her network had surfaced on Richard Crane, the financial trail connecting Alan's guardianship petition to the estate valuation documents Crane had quietly commissioned. She set each page down with the deliberate precision of someone who had been arranging this architecture for days. Then, she pulled out one more document. Crane has done this before, she said, tapping the page. I ran his case history. 3 prior guardianship petitions in Massachusetts. 2 of them flagged by the State Elder Affairs Office for procedural irregularities. He has a pattern. He finds families with elderly high net worth individuals, coaches them on building a behavioral record, and files when the documentation is thick enough. She looked up at me. Alan didn't architect this alone. Dad, someone walked him through every single step. My son didn't just betray me. My son hired a professional to help him do it. I looked at the papers spread across my kitchen table. The same table where Erin used to do her homework at 12 years old. Back when this house was full and loud and whole. Back before Alan decided she was expendable. He'd been wrong about that. He'd been wrong about a lot of things. Thursday morning we drove out to Framingham in the Volvo. Erin navigated from the passenger seat, coffee cups in the console, the radio low, just a father and daughter on an ordinary December morning, which is exactly what it needed to look like. Dr. William Hart's facility sat off Route 9, clean, quiet, unremarkable from the outside, the kind of place that does serious work without announcing it. I was in with Dr. Hart for 2 hours and 40 minutes. When I came out, Erin was in the waiting room, straight-backed, document bag on her lap, completely still in the way that meant her brain was running at full speed underneath. She looked up. Dr. Hart stepped into the doorway behind me. He looked at Erin and said, without ceremony, "Your father has the cognitive profile of a man 15 years younger. Whatever claims were going to be made, there is no medical ground to stand on." I watched 3 things move across my daughter's face in sequence. Relief, rage, resolve. She stood, shook Dr. Hart's hand. Then she looked at me with those eyes, her mother's eyes, my stubbornness. This impossible combination that produced the most formidable 29-year-old I have ever encountered. And she said, quietly, "Okay, now we build the case." And over the next 12 days, that is precisely what Erin Moore did. If you have been listening for a while, drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button while you're at it, and be sure you're subscribed. Aaron filed a preemptive counterpetition in Suffolk County Probate Court, establishing my full legal competency. Dr. Hart's evaluation attached, dated, certified, and court admissible. Any guardianship petition Alan filed now would walk directly into a wall he didn't know existed. She submitted the toxicology report, blister pack, both sealed bottles, full laboratory analysis to the Massachusetts State Police Elder Protective Services Unit. The report was classified as criminal evidence. A detective named Ron Paulson was assigned. Patient, thorough, the kind of man who builds a case the way I built structures, from the foundation up. She forwarded the complete paper trail to the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office. Richard Crane's involvement, the drafted petition, the 6-week preparation timeline, the prior case history, and then she did one more thing, one quiet surgical thing she mentioned almost as a footnote while we were cleaning up the kitchen table at 1 o'clock in the morning. I filed a formal complaint with the compliance department at Harwick & Cole, she said. Alan's firm. I included a copy of the guardianship petition naming him as proposed financial conservator of your estate. She stacked the last folder and looked at me. That's a textbook conflict of interest for a licensed financial advisor. They'll have no choice but to act on it. I looked at my daughter. When did you do that? I asked. Tuesday, she said, right after I called you with the lab results. She'd filed the complaint the same day she delivered the news, before I'd even asked, before we'd even discussed it. Alan was placed on administrative leave by Harwick & Cole on December 12th, pending internal review. He had no idea. He was still calling me every few days to ask if I was taking my drops. Every day, I told him, like clockwork. Let him believe that, because here is what my son had failed to account for when he stood at his front door on Thanksgiving night and pressed 2 bottles of those so-called supplements into his father's hands with a warm smile. He forgot who raised me, and he severely, catastrophically, irreversibly underestimated who I raised. Every trap has 2 sides, the one who sets it and the one who figures out where the door is. That morning of December 16th, I woke at 5:45, made coffee. I stood at my kitchen window and looked out at that gray Boston sky for a long time. Today was the day. Erin was already awake when I came downstairs. She was at the kitchen table in her socks, hair loose, reading something on her laptop with both hands wrapped around a mug. She'd been staying in the guest room for 11 days. 11 days of late nights at this same table, closed-door phone calls, documents printed and annotated in red ink, and stacked and labeled folders that had slowly taken over the left side of my kitchen. She looked up when I came in, didn't say good morning, just looked at me steadily with those eyes, her mother's shape, my resolve, and asked, "You ready?" I poured my coffee, sat down across from her. "More than ready," I said. "We move on the 16th, she said. "I'll call Paulson tonight." The trap Erin had built over those 12 days was a masterclass in structural engineering. She hadn't just built a legal defense, she had laid a criminal landmine. The competency certs from Dr. Hart were sealed and logged with the court. Detective Paulson's criminal case file was signed off by the DA. The net was fully woven. We just needed them all in one room to pull the cord. The plan itself was simple. Simple plans are the only ones that work. I called Alan at 9 o'clock on the morning of December 16th. I told him I needed to sit down with the family about some estate paperwork, that my attorney had flagged some items that needed to be addressed in person before the end of the year. I kept my voice slightly uneven, slightly halting. The voice of a 73-year-old man navigating something administratively confusing. Alan agreed before I'd finished the sentence. Of course he did. Estate paperwork, in person. His father was confused and cooperative. As far as Alan was concerned, Christmas had arrived 12 days early and was standing on his doorstep in a charcoal overcoat. We settled in at 2 o'clock. Erin left the brownstone at 11 o'clock in the Audi. 2 stops to make. She didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. I dressed carefully. Gray wool slacks, white button-down, the charcoal overcoat. I stood at the bathroom mirror for a moment and looked at the man looking back at me, and I straightened my collar and walked out the door. I arrived at Chestnut Hill Avenue at 1:55. Lauren answered before I knocked. Big, warm smile. The door swinging open with the practiced ease of a woman who'd been watching for my car. "Todd, come in. Come in. Can I get you anything? Something to drink?" "Just water," I said pleasantly. "Thank you, Lauren." She didn't flinch. Not even a flicker. Alan was in the living room with Keith. Both of them stood when I entered. That same careful, attentive deference that I now recognize for exactly what it was. Not respect. Management. Keep the old man comfortable and calm and right where you need him. Dad. Alan pulled me into a hug. Firm, warm, completely convincing. The embrace of a man who believed he was days away from everything he'd been building toward. Glad you came. Sit down. Sit down. In a minute, I said. I looked around that immaculate colonial revival living room. The same careful surfaces. The same staging. The last time I'd stood in this room, I was pretending to forget what my fork was for. I wasn't pretending anything today. I checked my watch. 1:58, 2 minutes. Alan settled into his chair with the loose, comfortable confidence of a man holding every card in the deck. So, estate paperwork. What did your attorney flag? I looked at my son across the room. 41 years old. My blood. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike on the Esplanade. Helped move into his first apartment in Alston. Watched Mary Lauren on a June afternoon in the Berkshires. She flagged everything. I said. A small silence. Alan's smile held. She. The doorbell rang. I watched my son's face as Aaron Moore walked through his front door. I have witnessed a few genuinely unforgettable things in 73 years of living. Structures I designed going vertical for the first time. The moment each of my children was born. A sunrise over Boston Harbor from the top of a job site on a cold March morning in 1987. This was one of them. Alan's smile didn't collapse all at once. It left in stages, like a building losing power floor by floor. First, the eyes changed. Then the corners of his mouth lost their hold. Then his jaw went just slightly slack before some instinct caught it. Lauren made a sound behind him that was not a word. Keith stood up from the couch, then slowly sat back down. Erin walked in like she owned every inch of floor beneath her feet. Dark wool coat, leather document bag over one shoulder. The complete and total composure of someone who had been preparing for this specific moment for 12 days. She came and stood beside me and looked at her brother across the room with an expression that contained nothing warm whatsoever. Alan, she said, just his name, like a period at the end of a very long sentence. What? Alan looked from her to me. Dad, what is this? What's she doing here? She's my attorney, I said, and my daughter, both of which she's always been. You just forgot the second part. Erin set her document bag on the coffee table. She opened it without rushing, no drama, no performance. Just the clean efficiency of someone who had done this before and would do it again. The room was so quiet. I could hear the December wind pressing against the windows. She placed 3 documents on the table, side by side, precise. The first document, she said, her voice the temperature of the street outside, is a certified toxicology report from an independent laboratory confirming that the sealed supplement bottles given to my father on November 22nd contain concentrated scopolamine well above any therapeutic threshold. The toxicologist's written report classifies the finding as, and I'm quoting directly, consistent with intentional poisoning. Lauren sat down on the arm of the couch. Her face had gone the color of the walls. The second document is the mental competency and guardianship petition drafted by Richard Crane of Brookline, signed by Alan Moore and Keith Moore, along with correspondence and filing records establishing a preparation timeline beginning in mid-October. She paused. Let the room absorb it. The petition names Alan as primary guardian and financial conservator of my father's estate. Keith was staring at the carpet. The third document is a court-certified independent cognitive evaluation conducted by Dr. William Hart of the Framingham Neurological Assessment Center, dated December 5th, establishing my father's full legal competency. She looked up from the documents and let her gaze move from Alan to Lauren to Keith with the same steady clinical precision. So, to be very clear about what you did, you deliberately poisoned a fully competent man, staged witness behavioral episodes to manufacture a medical record of decline, and signed your names to the financial motive for doing so. A beat. You didn't make a mistake. You built a case. And so did we. Alan stood up. Erin, everybody calm down. This is, sit down, Alan. My voice was different. He sat down. I want a lawyer, he said. Something had left his voice. That easy, managed confidence hollowed out. What was underneath was smaller than I'd expected, younger somehow. That is the first intelligent thing you've said since November, Erin replied. I strongly encourage it. She looked at me, gave the smallest nod. I took out my phone and called Detective Ron Paulson. He picked up on the first ring. "Mr. Moore, we're ready," I said. They arrived in 2 unmarked vehicles, no sirens, no theatrical entrance, just 4 detectives, and the quiet procedural efficiency of people who understood that understatement was more devastating than spectacle. Detective Paulson was a heavy-set man in his mid-50s, gray mustache, the unhurried manner of someone who had done this enough times to know that rushing it cheapens it. He introduced himself at the door, showed credentials, and walked into that immaculate living room like he had all the time in the world. Lauren started crying the moment Paulson began reading the charges. Not the controlled, managed emotional display I'd seen from her before. Real crying. The kind that comes when the architecture of a lie collapses all at once, and there's nothing left to hold the face together. Keith wouldn't look at me. He stared at the floor and kept his hands very still on his knees. Alan said nothing. He looked at the carpet while Paulson spoke, and I knew from the quality of his silence that he had already been coached by someone, possibly Crane, possibly an instinct, on exactly what not to say if this moment ever arrived. He'd planned for the possibility of getting caught. That detail, above everything else, was the one that cost me something permanent. The handcuffs came out, and that's when Alan looked up. Not at Aaron, not at Paulson, at me. "Dad." His voice broke on the single syllable, clean in half. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe 31 years of engineering, the need to understand exactly where a structure failed and why. Maybe something older than that. Maybe I just needed to hear him say it out loud. "Why?" I asked. Just that. One word. The room went still. And then my son, my 41-year-old son, standing in his colonial revival on Chestnut Hill Avenue with a detective's hand on his arm, started to cry. Not the quiet, dignified kind. The ugly, unraveling kind that a man produces when every wall he's built comes down at the same moment. "I didn't, Dad. I didn't mean for it to go this far." He stopped, wiped his face with the back of his hand. "The business. I had a business I was trying to get off the ground, and it went bad, really bad. I owe people. I owe serious money to serious people, and I didn't know what else to do." And Keith, he glanced at his uncle, who was still looking at the floor. "Keith came to me in September. He said there was a way. He laid the whole thing out, and I said no at first. I said no, I'm not doing that. But you did it anyway," I said. "Lauren." His voice dropped. "Lauren said it wasn't. She said it wasn't like we were hurting you. That you were 73 and you'd either end up in a home, or..." He couldn't finish the sentence. I looked at Lauren. She had both hands pressed over her mouth, tears running quietly, and she didn't look up. He was old. He'd end up in a home, or dead anyway. So, it wasn't really wrong. That was the math they'd done on my life. "Look at me, Alan," I said. He looked at me. "You sat across from me at that table. You counted 11 drops into my glass. You watched me get sick, and you exchanged looks with your wife over the dinner table." My voice stayed even. It surprised me that it stayed even. "And then you put 2 more bottles of poison in my hands at the door and told me to take them every day." I let that sit between us for a moment. That's not a man who got into trouble and made a bad choice. That's a plan, and you need to own what it is. He was crying too hard to answer. I turned to Detective Paulson. "I'm done," I said. Alan Moore, Lauren Moore, and Keith Moore were each charged with felony elder abuse, criminal conspiracy, and assault by means of chemical poisoning under Massachusetts General Law Chapter 265. Richard Crane was referred to the Massachusetts Board of Bar Overseers and disbarred pending criminal investigation for his orchestrating role in the guardianship scheme. Alan was formally terminated by Harwick and Cole effective December 16th, the same day the handcuffs went on. When the house was empty, it was just Aaron and me. The candles Lauren had lit on the mantel were still burning. This small, absurd, domestic detail that made the whole afternoon feel slightly surreal. The good china was visible through the dining room doorway. Lauren had apparently been preparing for a dinner that was never going to happen. I walked to the front window and looked out at Chestnut Hill Avenue. Bare trees, pewter sky, the quiet street going blue in the early December dark. 24 days ago, I parked the Volvo right there and walked up that front path genuinely happy about cranberry relish. Erin came and stood beside me. "Your estate," she said quietly. "The irrevocable trust documents are already filed. Everything is protected. I'm the managing trustee, but Dad, it is entirely yours. Every decision, every distribution, every cent. I want you to be absolutely clear on that." She paused. This was never about the money for me. I knew that. I had always known that. That was the precise difference between my daughter and my son. One of them had looked at me across a table and seen a father. The other had looked at me and seen an estate. I know, I said. She leaned her head briefly against my shoulder. One moment. Then she straightened. Get you out of here? She asked. Yes. We walked out of that house together. I pulled the door shut behind me without looking back. The December air came at us clean and cold and honest. The best thing I'd felt in 24 days. I stopped at the top of the front steps. There's a place on Newberry Street, I said. Does a lobster roll that'll make you question every life decision that kept you in Philadelphia. Aaron laughed. Full and unguarded and real. My daughter's laugh. The one I hadn't heard enough of in 5 years. And it landed somewhere deep and necessary. Lead the way, old man, she said. Old man. I smiled and walked down the steps. The case went to trial the following spring. I sat in that courtroom in my gray wool slacks and my white button-down on the day of sentencing. And I listened to a judge speak in the precise, formal language of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And what she said, stripped to its essence, was this. What was done to Todd Moore was not a family dispute. It was a crime. Alan received 4 years, Lauren 3, Keith 2.5. Richard Crane was facing his own separate criminal proceedings. I did not feel triumphant walking out of that courthouse. I want to be honest about that because I think you deserve the honest version. You do not feel triumphant when your son goes to prison. You feel the accumulated weight of every year, every phone call, every Thanksgiving, every moment you wish you had seen sooner and didn't. But underneath that weight, solid and load-bearing and permanent, I felt something else. Clarity. The specific clarity of a man who has been lied to for a very long time and has finally, completely, stopped being lied to. The feeling of a fever breaking, of a winter ending, of putting down something heavy you carried so long you forgot it wasn't supposed to be yours to carry. If this story found you, share it with someone. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from. I will see you on the next one.